And we're back. And I do have with me a guest. I had a complete system crash, everybody, so I do apologize. I got with me here an old friend and confidant. Last time we spoke was what, 2016, Phil?
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been quite a while, and
So,
a lot's happened between then and now. I mean,
oh,
it was our friend Thomas House of Deegan who was in hot water, well,
hmm
to say the least. But now it's the entire bloody
you,
planet.
planet, exactly, planet.
Yeah. So, just so people know that I'm not talking to myself, why don't you unpack who you are and how is Virginia?
West Virginia.
West Virginia,
Yeah,
yes.
we broke away during the Civil War. It was unlawful, just about like everything else. But I'm a former physics teacher. Taught physics for about 40 some years, and I was studying the laws of physics. Gravity and things pretty much made sense to me, even though we don't have everything figured out in the science realm. As a matter of fact, gravity is probably still one of those enigmas. But what really surprised me was when I had children and I started to really think about the future, my posterity, as the founder said. Um, and I looked at the way the country was going and was thinking about what my children would have in the future, and this would have been in the early 90s, I knew something was terribly wrong. And even though for the first 40 years of life, I had no children, and then my wife and I had four daughters within 5 years, my life changed because now I had a vested interest in the future. And I couldn't understand the laws of government. We didn't have real money. We've had over 16 unconstitutional wars since I was born in 1950. That's when the Korean War started. And there's nothing more important than a country can do than go to war. Yeah,
Can I pause you there just for a second? I mean, like
sure.
you said 16. I feel like I'm turning 48 this year. I had to think about it for a second, but yeah, I'm turning 48 this year, and I feel like 10 of those happened in my lifetime, like at least.
Right. A lot of them we wouldn't think about, like Panama. But
True.
we went into Panama and we took out Noriega, who was the leader of Panama, unlawfully. We kidnapped him, brought him back to the United States, even though he had made something like 40 some phone calls to the White House directly to talk to Papa Bush. So what's going on here? He wasn't paying his drug dues or something else was
Mm.
involved. You see, so yeah, and just think about all the people.
It kind of harkens back to what they did in Libya with Gaddafi.
Gaddafi, exactly.
Yeah.
And did you ever see the United Nations when Gaddafi spoke at the United Nations and the complete United States delegation walked out? Um, and they didn't complete the broadcast of his address, which he was making some really good points. It's just like when the children from Waco, who were released before they torched the church, let's call it what it is, a church.
Yeah.
Uh, those children were tested, were looked at by a psychologist, and he decided to. They decided they were going to make a public address where he was going to tell about what he found out about the released children from Waco. that didn't die in the fire as many other children did.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget watching TV, and this psychologist comes on, and he said we were really surprised when we evaluated these children. These children are in amazingly good shape, and he was going on and on about he couldn't believe how psychologically uh, grounded these children were and everything. And they cut off the all of a sudden, I don't remember what it was. All of a sudden, the sound went dead, and the network said, "Well, we have to go to a football game." I've seen this over and over again. You know that when you know their playbook,
It's
you
weird.
know.
It's weird because like every major event, especially like 9/11, you had
Mhm.
you had Bush Jr. Talking to preschoolers, worrying about the damn duck, and and then you had Biden checking his watch during the pullout from Afghanistan. Like you've got these like key moments, and yet this weird sense of like, oh, I got more important shit, like what's
Mhm.
going on?
And well, what's sad is that they can count on the ability to snooker the public, and the public not to pick up or not to remember. They've got such a short memory span. So, it's a sad commentary on humanity, and we are our own worst enemies.
I
Okay,
I I,
I
I agree. Yeah.
yeah, I my biggest problem is not Robert Morris or anybody else on this planet. It's really me. Okay,
Hmm.
I'm not in charge. God's in charge. Okay, and so we as a people we've dropped the ball
Well,
a long
I
time ago.
I hope he knows what he's doing, and if I have morality and ethics right, I think that he probably won't help anybody that won't help themselves. You know, like that's kind of how I'm gauging this, and you know, I sent you a few videos there to look at. I'm not sure if you checked them out, but
I copied the links. I copied the links.
yeah, I uh,
Mhm.
I can play them for us. Just hang on, let me see if I had all that set up. By the way, then my system crashed, so now I gotta recreate that whole bit. You know how this is. You could do everything right 100 times. As soon as you go live, it just goes to
It
crap.
happens here.
Yeah. It happens. I swear. I think this is how, like the ARPANET, as it actually was originally titled. I think that's how it was structured in the first place. But I digress.
Mhm.
Let me just ask you on the off. How is Mr. Deegan? How is Thomas?
He's free now.
Yeah.
Okay, has been for over a year, I believe.
Yeah.
Uh,
He's stayed out
he's
of.
uh, he's trying to stay out of keep his head down.
Yeah.
He's paid a big price already.
I imagine.
Years,
And
in prison,
we were
and
so certain at the time. We were kind of certain that something would give, like something in the system would break.
mhm,
And uh, zooming forward, you get like things like the Rittenhouse case and stuff like that. I mean, like, and still nothing budges. Like, even though he won in the face of these adverse odds, like, still nothing budges. And
well, Robert, I don't believe anything could possibly change in any major way unless people are held accountable for what they've done, and no one's been held accountable.
right.
Going back in the beginning of my lifetime, no one of any major significance has been held accountable. And Kennedy's death, or the World Trade Center, or Oklahoma City
Yeah.
bombing, or Waco, or all the medical experiments that have been done on American citizens.
Yeah.
It goes on and on.
And the thing that I noticed, like the proclivity towards like things happening to us is what is kind of in the mainstay here. We constantly have things happening to us. Like it's almost like a non-interactive movie that's playing back in a weird kind of a way. Do you understand what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like this. It's like a script like by a really bad writer, like, and it's just playing out though, and it's almost like it's non-interactive, and like it was 2014 when I first started making videos, and I was complaining about how our government colluded with your government and the British government to put neo-Nazis in the Ukraine. And I just said it was a bad idea. Lo and behold, well, I wasn't wrong. And yet, I mean,
Well, they have worse plans than doing things to us, according to Charles Schwab and company. They actually want to change us.
oh yeah. Well, I think they've already done that because apparently they've got 80% vaccination here in Canada. They've got probably about, I don't believe the high number. I think it's probably on the lower end of probably about 60% of the planet is probably, gotten the jab. I think that's the only legal way to say it. But
Called calling.
yeah. Hey, and I wouldn't be surprised if half of that 60% is placebo, and 10 of that percent is probably a higher scale or a different variation or different version of the thing. I've heard all kinds of reports from the science, like from the sci-fi sense of it to the really horrible sense of it. Like, I mean, I've seen like reports of people pulling little tiny microscopic briquettes out of their bloodstream and what have you. And like and other people, well, we already know about myocarditis and other things, but I mean, there's all sorts of like random things taking place from what is still being served by way of an emergency, means. Yeah. Like you pull out the leaflet of this vaccine, it's all a bunch of empty blank pages. Like you don't, like they didn't have to publish that, it's just so wrong. And they don't have a problem lining up to get the vaccine. Well, gene therapy, I don't even want to give it the title of a vaccine, because by my definition, I don't even think it qualifies, to be honest. If it doesn't qualify as a vaccine to be utilized professionally and properly, then it doesn't qualify to be called as such. And it's an experimental gene therapy, in my opinion. And I'm just disgusted how people will run up in line to get this thing, but not run up in line to go and talk to their politician about, hey,
Good point.
This is what really ails me. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And how many people would sign up for a medical trial when you don't know the long-term effects? And the history has been a history of failure. So yeah, I mean, with people losing their natural immune system, we have no idea what the long-range effects are going to be. Now, we live streamed from my house here. A lady called in one time, and she was kind of frantic about taking the jab, and I would be too.
Yeah.
And I said, well, you definitely need to pray. But I did give her one piece of consolation, and that was, we know for a fact that some of these were found to be placebos. And there's evidence that it's really an experiment within an experiment.
It really is. It really is. And just I don't want to take you off course, but yeah, I mean, it's linked all the way back to HIV and the stuff that happened in the 90s. Like But yeah, go on.
Hmm. Yeah, it all hinges. It all points back to Fauci.
It does.
He is definitely
The
the
linchpin.
head
Yeah.
of the octopus. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's the man with a million arms. And well, it's kind of interesting. I'm going to be doing a documentary. Actually, it's a revisiting a documentary I did 22 years ago
Mm,
on June 1st, 2000. Having taught physics and having looked at the Apollo program, landing a man on the moon, um, it was very obvious to me once I opened my eyes and applied physics principles
mm,
that the whole thing was a hoax, and the biggest hoax up until COVID. It's the biggest worldwide hoax, and and it involved murder of astronauts who were saying this thing isn't going to work. You
mm.
know, so uh, Scripture says, "Pride goeth before a fall."
Right.
And if you look at the quarters, American quarters, okay, in the early '70s, and well, up till the early '70s, um, in front of Washington, it said, "In God we trust."
Right.
Now, they redesigned the quarter, and "In God we trust" is behind George Washington. It's very symbolic. We've turned our back
Mm.
on God. Okay,
And they do this shit
when
on
they
purpose. They do this on purpose, don't they? Like
all the time they
thinking
have
we
to.
don't notice. Like,
Mhm.
and most
Yeah,
of us don't.
eyes wide shut. The movie by
Good point.
Stanley Kubrick, and Stanley Kubrick was involved
Yeah.
in an ancillary way with the Apollo hoax. He
And you know, it's
actually,
funny. It's funny when you brought that up. I was thinking about it, and like, I'm thinking of like the flat earthers and this and that. And the thing with the Apollo hoax is that, like, I don't think for a second that they didn't go to the moon, but I think how they presented it to the public was absolutely fake. I think there was more to this. Like, there's aspects of it that are like evident of a hoax. Like, there's so many bits and pieces that we can unpack. That could be
oh,
a whole different. That could be a completely different
well,
podcast. You know what I mean? But
well, that's why I'll be doing a live stream
right,
this coming Saturday,
yeah,
and I will be expanding on that because think about this, Robert. If the people of the world, if it came out, if there were whistleblowers who finally said, and there have been ones who wanted to be whistleblowers, but they
yeah,
usually end up dead.
yeah,
Uh, but just imagine what it could do to a mind-controlled world if they found out that in 1969 they or their parents or whatever were snookered beyond belief. You know,
yeah,
it you got to break. You have to break the mind control. Okay,
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
that's why I'm doing this, and
Especially with
there's
the technology of the day. Like I mean, we
yeah.
have. If you really want to look at that, we have like 10 times the technology today with like people with cell phones
Oh,
and cameras and it was so much easier back in the
Robert.
day. Like, okay, there was people framing other people for doing things, and it's like
Mhm.
it's just a lot easier to get caught now than it was back in the day. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So,
I find the more I look at their original footage, the more I find
oh
it's
yeah,
it's amazing. Now, like you said, I can't say we never went to the moon, but I can tell you we didn't go to the moon with the Apollo program. Okay,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but then what we see and what they have are two different things.
But you know what? Actually, I did read a study that somebody did on the language that was used in the Apollo program and all the NASA programs. That the Apollo, anything referring to the Greek mythology
Hmm.
of the time, were literally covers for another operation that had a completely different
Good
naming
point.
convention. Like it was,
Yeah.
it starts to like unpack. Like, oh, so you hear about? I'm trying to think of. There's like a Magellan program versus the
Hmm.
Apollo program, and one's not Greek, so one's more likely to be accurate rather than a facade put on, by them. But speaking of facades, that whole thing with the Nazi party being put in power in the Ukraine is a
Hmm.
really big deal.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah. I wasn't aware of that until recently. I
yeah,
was aware of the Nazis. I was aware of the Nazis involved in the space program. Not only Nazis, but Satanists like Jack Parsons,
right,
who
right,
who made who he started JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
right,
Um,
right, right.
but he was a member of the Temple of Set. He was an Aleister Crowley um, protege,
Mm.
and yet he was way up there in NASA. But then, Project Paperclip brought all those Nazis
Yeah, well,
into the
I'm
program.
starting to rethink what I originally felt. When you feel like something is off, like it doesn't smell right, and it's like
Mhm.
you're not going to eat that sandwich because you're going to get sick. It's like
Yeah, yeah,
I'm gonna not eat that. Well, that
yeah.
I've always felt that way about Operation Paperclip because, I always felt off put by the the Russian aspect of it because I'm like, well, if they were our friends then, why aren't they still our friends? And if they're not our friends now, why did we work with them? I just, as a kid, I never understood this. Like, I was always kind of
Mhm.
putting that politic in my head and going, something didn't smell right. And I'm starting to reevaluate Operation Paperclip. It's like, are you telling me that NASA was created from, the byproducts of the Nazi regime, and Russia and the States are just like cleverly saying, yeah, we'll just split the, it's just the output of war, just the spoils.
Mhm.
We'll just share. No, they won't. Or if they do, then they're in on it, like
Yeah.
together. And then that was my original thought, and I have to reconfigure that thought and say, well, maybe they weren't just in cahoots. Maybe they were actually working together from day one. Not Russia. I'm talking about the Nazis here. Like,
Mhm.
I think Russia, despite how they used to be a communistic environment, we were taught to hate them and blah 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 blah. Again, that harkens to the fact that I think we were taught to hate them by a government that just made us want to hate somebody. Like that was the entire point of the Cold War. Because I mean, you look at the cooperation that the Russians have with the United States when it comes to the space program.
Mhm. Yeah.
The space shuttle was grounded for how many years? It's like, oh yeah. Oh, by the way, Russia, I know we're not cool and all, but we kind of have a couple astronauts that we need to get food up to there. Can we kind of borrow your launch pad there?
Yeah, it's just like
Can we do that?
just yeah, Rockefeller was banking in Moscow throughout the
Yeah.
Cold War, and Arm and Hammer was going back and forth with business dealing. So
Yeah.
on some levels, it was operation as norm.
I'm liable to think now, like that. It's how can I say
Like good cop, bad cop.
yeah, good cop, bad cop, and it's convenience of the moment and of the
Hmm.
politic. I,
Yeah,
we have this very binary way of thinking. Like something is either good or it's bad. Like it's not
yeah,
both, right? It's kind of like that binary state, or whereas in comparison to quantum, you have like this. It can be 0 and 1 and everything in between at the same time. I
hmm,
think it's more of that analog kind of a
hmm,
situation,
yeah,
because like I mean, what we see happening right now in Ukraine is deplorable. Like,
yeah. But But
hang
forget
on. I was
white
just,
hats and black hats. They're all gray hats.
I was just gonna say that. I was just gonna say that because like it's not like Russia's the good guy or the bad guy. It's not like America's the good guy or the bad guy. Because I mean, history says that America kind of only comes in at the last minute, to save the day kind of deal. Like, here I come to save the day. And they come in, they swoop in, and they do their thing. But really, I don't think that's accurate. I think they're well involved from day one. And it's not just America, by the way. I'm not trying to paint a bad picture of America at all. It's the Commonwealth. It's the entire construct. I made a joke earlier yesterday. I said, well, we only have maritime law because it's who controls the seas, right? It's the British Commonwealth to this day is they're the iron fist that actually rules everything. We wouldn't have something called maritime law if they weren't the fundamental force behind it. You know what I mean? And this goes back to the monarchy. It goes back to the days of Odessa. This goes to the Ottoman Empire. Like, this goes back, and we're just kind of seeing the chips fall into place now. Like, after all is kind of said and done, it's like the cattle herders want to do their final bit now, and it's like they got themselves and us to contend with.
I have a question.
Sure.
You're Canadian. You're in Western Canada, correct?
Yep, I'm in British Columbia.
Okay, so the whole world's had their eyes on Canada now. What you tell us from a Canadian's point of view? What's the situation right now?
Ooh, that's a loaded question because I'm probably not the best Canadian to ask, but because I'm a little bit aware, and that's the thing is that so many of us are not aware. I've gotten into so many arguments with my fellow Canadians about this, and it was just a simple question. It was like. Do you think that, like, with this trucker situation, right? I was like, do you think, do you think this isn't, like, kind of stupid how we're handling this? And it's always, well, they're just a bunch of truckers. Like, that was a general, like, yeah, like, that was what people were coming back at me with. It's like, whoa, slow down. They're just the livelihood and the actual supply chain methodology of the entire country, just a bunch of effing truckers? Are you telling me that's what? So, I mean, I was having my own little knee-jerk reactions to this, and I was like, wow, I live in a population of really dumb people. Now, I mean, I can step back from that and say that was said out of angst and and frustration, but it's still not far from the truth because our government paid the CBC with taxpayer money to basically tout whatever it was that they wanted to tout, and the other groups like global like actual commercial like networks like global CTV also received payoffs because that's what the Trudeau government did. They simply just went and said, yeah, here you go. Here's a bunch of money, and you'll get more of it if you keep saying what we want you to say. And that's how we got some brilliant people come out of the woodwork. Anita Krishna, she worked for Global as a news director. She got fired because she was asking too many questions about the jab, and victims. Well, I don't want to say victims because that implies something, but we should be using that language, but I won't. But yeah, she was like wondering about all of the adverse reactions and what have you, and of course they said, we don't think that you're showing journalistic integrity, so you got to go. It's like, wait a minute. I'm being a journalist actually, and you're telling me I'm not showing journalistic integrity. So I mean, it kind of goes to show, like, where this all kind of lies. And again, I want to kind of go back to that whole aspect of people's perceptions. And you yourself, because you even said earlier that you didn't know about the Nazi regime. I mean, I'm sure you saw in the news that Ukraine was getting a new proxy government, but nobody knew that it was a Nazi sympathizing group. And it's bizarre because nobody knew. Like, in a majority sense. Like, I mean, obviously people knew, or else I wouldn't have been able to report on it back in 2014. But, like, we kind of knew who it was that they were putting in there. And I was just saying, hey, that could be a bad idea. Like, that's probably not a good thing. People probably should say something. They should. And they didn't, and we didn't. And here we are today. And we literally face global thermonuclear war if people root for the wrong person. You know what I mean? And it's not even as binary as, like, is USA or Russia. It's not even that binary. It's not even close. It's not even a Russia-US thing, because if it was, damn well the US would have been in there 5 months ago. They would have been in there with shock and awe. They would have done the same playbook, right? But no, they can't. They literally have no legal authority. Just because it's NATO. NATO is just with Canada, Mexico, and the United States. And their relations with the EU Union is, again, just with the European Union states that have been involved there. So you got the EU-NATO correlation. That still doesn't give them the right to go in unless something of theirs is destroyed. And guess what? Putin is being very, very diligent and very careful.
Oh my.
He's being very careful.
Yeah. Right.
Like, not in the eyes of the public, though, because
they don't know.
They don't know. Slazinski, or whatever his name is, Zelensky, that's it. I keep trying to say Straczynski, but that's the guy who wrote Babylon 5, which is a science fiction show. So
Okay.
I get the names confused. But yeah, it's just bizarre, though, that people aren't being given this information, and that shows me motivation right there. That shows me motive. That shows me that obviously that there is something to hide, because they're hiding stuff. And if they're paying off, even for something that is as in-house as the trucker movement was, that those same networks are going to fool the people again. And I always emphasize to people that, even if they get caught 1 week, what, you think they're going to be honest to you next week? Like, it's like, give your head a shake. Like,
Considering what you were saying about Russia being, not going in and like a bulldozer, think about this. They've owned the Ukraine skies from almost the very beginning.
Yeah.
And yet they did not go in, just like the United States.
No, they didn't. That's right.
To Iraq and everywhere else and totally destroy the infrastructure.
They easily could have.
Easy. Once you own the skies, you could take out anything, any water plant, cell towers, power plants, you name it. It could be over. And that's what the United States never did that.
One of the first things they did, one of the first things that I almost combined the word Russian and Putin at the same time. I almost said Putin. But the very first target that they acquired and held strategically was Chernobyl. And that tells people something if they look into it, because there's still half-spent rods that are in a state of nuclear fission. Those things don't go out. You can't just hit them with a fire extinguisher. They don't go out. Those things will be burning for another 100 years. They need to be properly monitored and kept under control, I guess you could say, if you want to. They need to be contained and sustained in a fashion that doesn't irradiate the entire vicinity. They took that location first, and I mean that tells you something. It tells you that they're not just there for the destruction of Ukraine, obviously. You know what I mean? They're there to make sure that everything is fine. They want to liberate it. No different than the United States helped liberate, countless countries in the European theater during World War II. I mean, this is a reverse shot. This is like a reverse kind of perspective of that now. It's so bizarre.
Yeah. It's hard not to actually root for Putin because, it's just like, it's kind of their version of the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah.
He didn't want missiles on his doorstep. Neither did we.
Yeah.
And we actually, put an embargo on the Russian ships going into Cuba and everything.
Yeah, it is bizarre. A lot of people that that are new to this, they might not know about the Cuban Missile Crisis, but I mean, like, that was a rock and a hard place. Like, a lot of people thought we were gonna die then. Like, they thought
that's when the bomb shelter occurred. The bomb shelters, yeah.
Yeah, and those videos that came out, or films that came out with kids hiding under their desk at school,
Cover, yeah.
It's like, yeah, that'll help.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Oh, if you see a flash, then cover your eyes.
Yeah. You've already seen it. It's done. Yeah. That's hilarious. Wow, it's hilariously dark. I mean, that's pretty dark humor. But I mean, at the same time, I think as a society, I mean, you're a pious man. I mean, as a society, we've really kind of dipped down below the meridian of morality, I think, personally. And like, I'm not nearly, I couldn't even call, I'm spiritual, but I think everybody says when they're not religious that they're spiritual. I am a spiritual man, but man, I can't believe how dark things have really gotten. People who call themselves moral really don't give a crap about anybody else and don't even know that they don't. It's just commensurate within their actions,
Well, I could tell you I'm a Christian, but I don't think most professing Christians are Christian.
Yeah.
I think the church, well, who did Christ revile? It was the hypocrites. And who had him killed? It was the church establishment. So, in here in in the United States, churches are incorporated. They actually contract with the government. And one of the things that Thomas and I put in our original suit in the West Virginia Supreme Court was that the Constitution of West Virginia, which is the only constitution in the United States that says churches are prohibited from incorporating.
Right.
So, I tried to point out that the church has been muzzled, okay, and it was the church and the black regiment that actually got the people to unite, and they were the news media of the day. It was the traveling preachers that brought the news from place to place. And so what's happened in West Virginia, because in 2015 I had gone to the governor, I'd gone to the attorney general, I had gone to the legislature and said, we are not following the Constitution, which has one great provision, which says churches are to actually be free of the government. Mm-hmm. And by incorporating, they can't be free of the government.
Right.
So West Virginia legislature in 2020 passed a resolution to change the West Virginia Constitution, to amend it so that churches can lawfully incorporate. So,
Mm.
I look at, if I was God looking down, I'd be pretty upset with the church that partners with the government.
Where's my
And
money?
yeah, for money purposes,
Yeah, no, I'm just saying,
LBJ,
if God were, I'm saying in the if sense, if,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So,
if it was a
so,
pyramid
uh,
scheme, you know what I mean?
mhm, yeah, yeah. So,
But,
you can see it's all love of money and power goes along with
uh,
it.
well,
So,
it's funny. A buddy of mine that he's a bit of a old school mobster type, and he said to me one day, this is going back about 20 years. He's like, you know why Ponzi schemes are illegal? I says, why? He goes, because they work. It's like, what can you do? Like, uh,
well, getting back to Canada,
yeah,
when the trucker strike um, was just getting started, I personally looked at it and thought, this is not going to end well unless, and it isn't probably going to happen, and that would be unless the vast majority of the people in Canada join,
yeah,
actively join. Okay, and personally, I think we're at the point where, um, and it probably should have happened a long time ago. In
yeah.
Poland, there was a man by the name of Lech Walesa,
Okay.
and he organized. He was the main organizer, uh, but Poland was under communist control, and
Mm,
basically they'd had enough of it, and they just said, "That's it. We're shutting down. We're not doing anything." So it wasn't just truckers or any other segment of the service and
mm-hmm.
the economic system. They
Right.
just shut it down. And if there's ever a time that the people of the world just say, "No, we're not playing your game anymore. Get
Yeah.
out of Dodge.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't leave, then you'll probably be executed." It's that
Yeah.
simple.
Yeah.
You're a bunch of criminals. You have a lot of blood on your hands, and so uh,
Eh,
you know,
and
yeah,
that's kind of like how the French Revolution kind of went about their business there too. I mean,
yeah. But it gets out of hand. That was
that's
it
what I
gets
mean. It got
right.
right out of hand too, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's weird how Trudeau went in the direction that he went in, and I'm still not sure if people understand how my primitive brain processes this, but I was constantly thinking, like, what is driving him to make this decision? Like, I'm like, who benefits from making
Mhm.
a kill move on your own career? Like, that was a career killer, to instantiate the Emergencies Act. I was like, that's not a beneficial move unless there's something tactical, strategic, or something to benefit from it. And you know what? That bitch Freeland, she said it all. And it was to do with the bank accounts. It was to do with unlocking the information to everyone's bank accounts because that's the only thing. That's the only thing, but it's a big thing because it's not just the bank accounts themselves, it's the histories,
Yeah.
it's the metadata, it's the ebbs and bobs of that data that determines a flow of every cultural, financial decision made. Like, and I mean, don't even ask me if you run that through a AI system what it might come up with. Like, don't even go there with me. But I'm just saying, like, the amount of data that could have been pulled and then just inserted into the WEF. I mean,
Well, that's you got to look at the WEF to understand Trudeau. Yeah.
this is true. And well, he's part of the young, what is it? The young globalist or the young
Global
global
leaders.
leader program. Yeah.
Hmm.
Wow. You know,
Plus most of your cabinet. Yeah.
it's just, yeah, most of the cabinet. It's kind of like
Yeah.
the Boy Scouts on steroids. It's like
Hmm.
what? Yeah, and I'll be honest with you. I I guess I've known of the IMF. We know of the Federal Reserve. We've known of like the Rothschilds, but the thing is that like every week there's like a new team to discover. And I don't. know that I knew of the WEF before last year. I barely knew about them and BlackRock,
Mhm.
you know, and you
Yeah.
talk about this stuff, and obviously people just go and discount it, like, you're just talking conspiracy theories. It's like, no, it's actually on their website. It's like, it's literally on their website and the Great Reset, like the whole thing. And we, like, 10 years ago, yeah, we'd be called, you know, conspiracy theorists. Today,
Mhm.
now we're called domestic terrorists.
Mhm. Well, you got to figure they have the enforcement,
Yeah.
and so that everything's going to be small fries to them. They can take out any opposition, and I think they uncloak when they're ready to
They do. And
go on the offense.
and I think that state of like Stockholm syndrome, that state that people are in while blind,
Magnified.
when they're blindly
Yeah.
following, at that very key moment, it's like, yeah, get them. They just go for it, and it's just
Yeah.
they don't even realize who they're rooting for at that point, you know. And it's a bit sad because it's not their fault. And like I say idiotic things like, like, oh, the sheeple and they're sheep, and blah blah blah. But the thing is, it's partly not their fault because they've been lulled into this, and
Right.
and, and by hard work and by no fault of their own, like, ambition to do what they want to do well, that they defer to the other experts in other fields that they don't feel qualified to comment upon. And when you defer that, and if you defer in that direction, it kind of, you're kind of trusting that those authorities that you're deferring to know what the hell they're talking about, that they're doing the moral thing in your absence. Like, these are the levels of trust that our people have. And it's just being so abused, and it's being defiled, and to the point where I think, like, people in the WEF and or any other controlling puppet masters, if you would, they don't give a shit. They're just like, you know what? Yeah, once you realize it, it's already too late. At that point. And
Yeah.
I think ultimately that's what we're trying to help avoid, but it's so hard. It's such a daunting task. I mean, like I was saying, like 8 years ago, I was brand new to this podcasting thing. I don't sound any different, and within 2 days of talking to Thomas Deegan, he was carted off to jail, and I was like, wow, like I was stunned then, just as I'm stunned now, and it's so bizarre, man.
Well, most people are motivated by fear, and there was another person who was working with Thomas, and early on, when he saw the first time that Thomas was basically kidnapped by the authorities, he decided he was bailing out.
That's
He
the
was
word. That's the word. Because when somebody says the word arrested, that implies that they did something wrong and were
right,
taken in form of punishment. No, yeah, he was kidnapped, and
right.
yeah, I just want to point that out.
So
Yeah,
yeah, so like I was saying, I had 4 children after the age of 40, and that caused me to look deeply into some things, and I for a while I thought, well, maybe if I get involved politically,
four
I could
children
do.
after 40. You
Yeah.
got there because you were too deeply into things. But anyway, go on.
so, so anyway, I ended up becoming chairman of the Constitution Party of West Virginia, and I ran for U.S. Senate. I ran for governor, and my latest and my last run was for sheriff. The reason I ran for sheriff was the sheriff has some autonomy, and he takes an oath to uphold the Constitution, and that's when COVID was coming out, and I
Mm,
promised in my advertisements, my campaign advertisements, that if I was sheriff, all the COVID mandates were over in our county because it wasn't going to happen
yeah.
while I was sheriff, But uh, I got maybe 500 out of 6 or 7 thousand ballots. You know, I was running third party, and of course, uh, the conditioning has been, for instance, they came up with the word. Oh, I'm trying to think. They used it on Thomas. He was shoot, I forget the term now. It was created by the CIA, and it basically what they do is they'll take a word and they create a narrative that goes
Yeah.
with that word.
Like
And
conspiracy theorist, basically.
yeah, that's what it was. They,
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, he during the trial, he had a state trooper there who said that he had, he was a conspiracy theorist, and
Which isn't conspiring to theory.
yeah, it's ludicrous, right? So
Yeah.
so if you say third party, the average person in this country now is conditioned to think wasting vote, third party waste vote,
Yeah.
third
Yeah.
party waste vote.
You don't
You
have
got to
a
stay
right. You
within.
don't have a right to an opinion because you didn't vote. It's like, well, my non-vote is a vote. Yeah.
So they, it was interesting. It was interesting to run for office and see all the games, all the little things they pulled, the media
Yeah.
blackout. I mean, one, and I would actually have handled some things differently simply because as you get more knowledge and more
Well,
gumption.
well,
But
that's
in one of the candidate forums, I was running for U.S. Senate
yeah.
against Shelley Moore Capito. She's a West Virginia senator.
Right.
But at the time, she was a congresswoman and she was running for Senate, and so was I. But I was running third party Constitution Party, but who knows what the Constitution is? Most of them haven't read it. So the person who's hosting the candidate forum, he is telling what the basic rules are. Everyone's going to get 5 minutes, and we're going to go in this order. But when he says everyone's going to get 5 minutes, he says everyone's going to get 5 minutes except our very own Shelley. She can talk for as long as she
Oh.
wants. so,
Oh yeah.
so we're eating dinner, and Shelley had come in like a queen of the ball, and I realize now when it was my turn, I should have gone up there and said, well, there's no sense in me speaking to you folks because you've already decided who you're going to vote for.
Yeah.
You've got your Shelley Moore Capito, I could kick myself for not being so transparent as to say this is a farce.
Yeah.
Why
And
should I participate? Why should I continue?
but it's almost like you have to. It's almost like you have to play their idiot game to get idiot results, and it's like because you don't get anywhere any other way. You know, they
Yeah, but
almost
you
they
don't want to join him, to try to
yeah.
fight him.
Yeah, and that's the thing. But they put you in a position where you have to make that rational choice, and the only other option is some other kind of more kinetic, option. And
I'm I'm surprised more people haven't flipped out.
I can't believe. I think they're suppressed. I think that's why everyone's on Ritalin or on
Yeah.
diazepam and all the other amzepams that are out there.
Alcohol, you name it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I I kind of equate it to that movie V for Vendetta.
hmm
It's almost like that's playing out like in a beat for beat kind of plot line. Like whether or not, I mean, we could do a whole show on predictive programming and what have you, but
Oh, yeah.
but I mean that whole thing is like playing out. In fact, it even involved it even involved a huge disease scare in the movie, and it's just weird how it's just kind of playing out in the same fashion. Yet people are still buying it. They're still buying it hook, line, and sinker, and not thinking critically. I think that's where we're really losing out, and it's. I think it's a very, very well orchestrated, multifaceted thing. Like everything from George Soros all the way along the line. Like these are hitting every major like point of structure in our culture and in our education and in our finances and in our loyalties, like right across the board. It's
Yeah, I couldn't understand. I couldn't understand why people would get involved in this when they knew it. You know, they weren't going to have eternal life on Earth during their lifetime, but still
yeah. I mean,
be so dedicated to it. But you know,
like
when
like
I put together the spiritual aspect of it, that's what made the difference.
well,
See that this is their religion. They are fanatical humanists,
yeah.
and you know, so you can't understand their
That's the thing.
motivation
That's the
until you
thing.
understand that.
Yeah, that is it. I think you just nailed it right on the head. There is that like back in the day. I mean, even going back to the Roman Crusades that went through Canada and through the U.S. and through the native indigenous populations here. You know, like using God and using the religion as a point of force to overtake a population. Like it's like presenting them with a couple options. It's like die now or die later, but die really badly and burn for the rest of eternity, or don't. You know, and it's like presented with those options in a pinch. I mean, you're gonna well, I don't want to die now. I don't want to burn. Okay, keep talking. You know, like it's kind of like okay, I'm listening. You know, but I mean, now I think it's turned into a knee-jerk reaction though. Like I mean, it's a hard sell to begin with. You know,
Kind of reminds you of plea bargaining.
it kind of does, doesn't it? Like it's like holy crap.
Mhm.
Like it's just bizarre how people will easily dismiss the suffering that other people are doing, you know, or going through rather,
Mhm.
and yet still want to like I don't know bludgeon other people with you know like hate crimes and shit. It just boggles my mind how obfuscated the whole morality issue is because like I don't think any of it's moral. I don't think any of it is. I think it's completely underhanded, and I think people are just duped. Personally, like, you know,
Yeah,
that's kind of where I sit on this whole thing because
yeah, but wouldn't you say that witnessing human nature shows us that there has to be something beyond us,
yeah,
that we can't lift ourselves up by our bootstraps and solve this problem.
yeah.
As a matter of fact, it just takes us deeper into the tar pit.
Well, that
So
I mean, we have so many examples of horrible crap that we've done to each other, like over the eons. Like, I mean, we've done so much horrible stuff, and what's happening now is probably equally as bad, but in a world where we have phones like, that have cameras better than like the best networks had like 50 years ago, we still aren't capturing and reviewing our nature. Like we still aren't visiting that. Instead, what's happening is we're visiting the marketability of thought. We're the marketability of morality in absence of bad stuff off frame, like outside of the frame, and it's just, I don't know, man. It's weird. I'm really glad you came to talk to me because I wanted to get your perspective on this, man, because it was
Mhm.
like one of those things that it's been building up to a point, and I think right now we are at the doorstep of a major uh,
Oh,
this is
yeah.
where
You think it's been crazy?
yeah,
Look out.
the games have
Yeah,
really just begun,
yeah.
and you could the Hunger Games, whatever you can say. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? You can say whatever you want, but the thing is,
Yeah,
like everything up to this point has been weird. But I think the games really have just begun because
yeah. If you project this out, it bothered me being a science person that
yeah,
the
yeah,
technology could be used to free people. Okay, the computer, a lot of good things could have been done in terms of election security. Just using computers, it could have been solved.
yeah,
In my mind, and I have a master's in educational computing, and but the scientific technocracy
yeah,
is man's down bad side using these things for
yeah.
control,
And, and
and that
and well, even using the scientific community and the scientific method against the people in absence
yeah,
of scientific method, it's like trust the science. It's like, well, show me the
yeah.
science. Like,
And
where
who
is it?
would have thought they would get so many doctors and pharmacists and scientists to go along with this crap?
Because
It's
they're in
sad.
fear of not being able to provide for their
Man,
families. Like,
you're prime motivator.
prime motivator, yeah. And you know, and again, like here's another thing where I question the science is because the scientific method is to constantly question the scientific method. It's to
That's
constantly question it.
exactly.
So like
Yeah, yeah.
you can't trust the science if you can't ask the science a question. Like, like
Yeah, to say the science is solved is unscientific
that's
in
totally,
itself.
yeah. It's completely
Yeah.
it's catastrophically like wrong. Like I don't know, and like, and but I mean to like the average Joe or Jane, you know,
Hmm.
or Jim, they just completely like trust the science, like with that glazed over look. It's like
Yeah.
no,
Yeah, in my
yeah,
40 years in public education, I've seen the takeover um, by the federal government and really the international government
which is
through
the
computers.
oligarchy. Yeah,
Yeah, through computers. I mean, one of the seminars, and Pastor Butch and I had 9 seminars, 8 in West Virginia and one in Missouri. And
right.
these were 3-day seminars where we had people from all over. We even had people from Canada come down and speak. I had George Bothwell from Owen Sound come down and speak,
Oh, it
and
sound lovely
yeah,
place.
yeah, he is a fantastic guy. He was he he's like uh, Thomas. He actually has been beaten and jailed and everything else simply just for telling the truth. Um, but I kind of lost my train of thought. I'm 72, so I can say he was a senior military.
Well, you're doing
But
better than me, and
yeah,
I'm only 48. So hey.
we're in a heck of a mess, and you know I I'm amazed at what Thomas and I and Gene uh, accomplished, because I don't know if you understand, but after the fiasco in West Virginia and the Supreme Court case that we had and
Yeah.
everything, we took it to the federal government, and we actually I got an arbitration award, a permanent injunction against the federal government.
Okay.
Um, but unfortunately, and this was done on behalf of all. It was done key tan. It was done on behalf of all Americans. So the federal government basically either thought we would go away. They thought we would probably be like most people who, yeah, you have the right to petition your government, but they don't have the responsibility to even answer. Well,
Right.
when you notify the federal government that they are violating the Constitution, the contract called the Constitution, and they do not respond, and you prove that they are operating in ways and by authorities that aren't actually granted in the Constitution. We actually offered a new Constitution on behalf of all Americans,
Right.
and they didn't answer that. And then we went to arbitration, and the arbitrator ruled in my favor. So we actually established a contract where the people could actually do what Lech Walesa did in Poland, but they could actually do it legally and lawfully using the current government's constructs, and
Right.
just say, hey, we now have we're indemnified against the government. You broke your contract. We offered you a new one. You didn't respond. Therefore, you accepted. We actually went into a legal, lawful mode of approving it through the arbitration. And so, what we did could never be taken away. It wouldn't be worldwide. We had over 4,000 people
Right.
in the country,
But it
or
could.
in every 50 states, say, yeah, we're joining this contract.
Yeah,
It's
and it
been
could be
established.
exemplified. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It could be
Mhm.
exemplified, and by precedent, it could be applied later. That's good.
Right, and I had a lot of people from Canada that say they wanted to join, and I said, really, that's a nice idea, and in reality, you could say, well, we really have a world government. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just like the 50 states of
Well,
the United States.
it's not as radical as it sounds, though, because
Yeah,
that's
right.
what they did. That's exactly what.
Right now,
Yeah,
every state is simply a construct of the federal government.
yeah,
The federal government went into Texas, and said, if you don't do airport homeland security, we're going to make a no-fly zone over Texas.
oh yeah,
Where was their authority?
that would
Where was
fly.
their authority for that? Where was their authority for that? So in
Uh,
reality, when West Virginia dropped the ball,
hmm,
we simply went to the head of the corporation. You see, Robert, it's a corporation.
gotcha. Because that's
It's not only a problem with the churches being incorporated.
yeah,
Government
everything.
is incorporated.
Every town, every city is an incorporation in
Yeah.
itself. Yes.
Exactly. So if you get an
Uh-huh.
attorney, a bar attorney, he's incorporated.
Right. To
Okay?
work under
If you go
statute.
to the West, if you go to the West Virginia Supreme Court and you look at the corporate structure, you find out the West Virginia Supreme Court is a subcorporation of the U.S. Supreme Court. So they're all part of a club.
That's
It's a big
right.
club. And you ain't in it.
Yeah.
You ain't in it, as George Carlin said.
Yeah, as George Carlin said, that's right. Well, my having you on here with me isn't without my ulterior motives. And have you heard of a speaker? He's a psychologist, Jordan Peterson.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Very
I've recently, you know, uh, been watching his material, and man, boy, can he unpack a lot. And
he left the university up there in Canada.
yeah, no, he went and did his own thing. Just kind of
Hmm.
middle finger to everybody, and just I'm going to do my thing, and he does it well. And I really took on a new disposition when it came to the whole politics thing, because he said something that really kind of hit home with me, and it was that there's a certain cynicism that kind of coincides with politics that people need to get rid of, because I could paraphrase in my own words what he basically said is that the reason that scumbags are in there is because we let the scumbags in there because we don't want to do that work. And quite frankly, that's because of our cynicism towards politics. And I completely did a 180 on the whole thing. And maybe I and other people like myself should get involved and in our local politics. You know what I mean?
Local.
And, I mean, that's where it is. That's where it starts. If everybody did their own local politicking, we wouldn't have any room for scumbags to get involved,
Yeah. It's like I'm trying to think of his name, Sheriff Mack. Sheriff Mack. He wrote a book called America's Sheriffs, America's Last Hope,
Mm.
Sheriffs, America's Last Hope. And that's one reason I ran for sheriff because you know even the governor would have no control over me as sheriff because I would be the only the only law enforcement officer that's elected, and
Mm.
that was a smart thing to make a sheriff who is responsible to his locale
Mm-hmm.
and is elected. But there are no other law enforcement officers that are elected in
Yeah.
the United States, just the sheriff.
That kind of happens here in Canada too, because in most of the provinces, they have like a provincial police. So like in Ontario, they have like the Ontario Provincial Police. They don't have any such thing here in British Columbia. We don't have a British Columbia Provincial Police. Instead, it just goes right up the line to the federal, to the RCMP. So like even our town, like my hometown in Hamilton, which is in Ontario, it breaks down even further from the OPP, the Ontario Provincial Police, down to the Hamilton Municipal Police. So like it has those levels. Out here, it's like friggin' wild country, like it's all federales out here, man. It's just the royal,
Yeah.
Canadian Mounties out here. And no,
Huh.
they don't drive horses out here, but
Okay.
yeah, it's bizarre though because like they're kind of like hired thugs in a sense. Like it's kind
Hmm.
of how you could like term it. And they kind of act that way too. Like they don't act like hometown police. You don't have a guy who's been in a neighborhood 30 years as a beat cop. Doing his bit for the neighborhood, for the community. No, none of that. It's
Yeah, it should be a calling.
yeah, yeah. It's just policed. It's basically just policed and hiring out whoever can you know. Well, we know the
Yeah, did you know the word police actually changed in form of speech? Police used to mean it was an action rather than a person.
okay,
That
yeah,
you
to do
like
something.
you
Yeah.
were going to clean up the area. They actually call that policing the area, cleaning it
Policing,
up.
right?
But it's just another way that words have morphed. Just like in West
Yeah.
Virginia, a driver used to be a commercial term. Now you're a
They used to
driver,
be called peace officers back in the day, weren't
peace
they?
officer. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. As a matter of fact, we had what was called a career day one time in the high school where I was teaching.
Hmm.
And one of the groups that was there for career day was the West Virginia State Police. And they had a pamphlet, and they pass out pamphlets to these students that went to different meetings to learn about different careers. And I got a hold of one of the pamphlets, and it said West Virginia State Police, a paramilitary organization. I was like,
It sounds
paramilitary.
crazy, but in the vernacular
So
though, it's true, right? Yeah.
it is. It is. So anyway, I got incensed about it, and I went to Charleston to
Paramilitary. That's hilarious.
a government overreach. The West Virginia Senate was having a hearing on government overreach, and so I got to testify, and I held up that pamphlet, and I said state police, and it's kind of there were a lot of state police around, and I held that up, and I said, what happened to peace officer, and so here's what they did. They changed the website after that. Okay, they took out paramilitary organization, but about 5 years later they added it back on. So um, I guess in reality it is a paramilitary organization because they're directly under the governor. They serve the governor,
That's
and they were
right.
supposed to they
Know
were
your
supposed to
editor.
be
Sorry. Yeah.
they were supposed to be security for the governor, but
Yeah.
they morphed into patrolling interstates
Yeah.
and of course as the counties as money dries up,
Yeah.
we're having to trust more in federal government
It is ironic because paramilitary is actually exactly functional and proper terminology, but its incantation kind of gives you kind of like the weebie-jeebies, when you hear paramilitary, because it just means outside of the military. Like it basically means not military. At the end of
Yeah,
the day,
good point.
you know what I mean.
Good
But
point.
but it's just it kind of delivers a connotation of like
Why not just call them police officers then?
yeah, just yeah. Well, that's just it. Like it's just funny. That's why I said know
Here,
your
here's what I
editor.
am. Here's
Yeah,
what I am. Here's not what I'm not.
yeah. Yeah, well, here's the thing though. Is like when they're making the decisions like that, like especially when it comes to making like material, like pamphlets and what have you. Um,
Mhm.
who's making those decisions? It's like definitely not a English major, you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
or somebody into culture or man of society or that kind of that area, because they're not thinking of the connotation that's delivered to the public, and you know again, this kind of has to make people realize, like they don't have it all figured out, really. Like they kind of they're pushing the right buttons, but they also don't have it all figured out because it's not a rock solid plan. Like it's not. There's a lot of X factors, and I'm hoping that we find a lot more X factors because we got to stretch this out because we got a lot of people to wake up there, Phil. We got a lot of people to wake up.
Long way to go and short time to get there.
Yeah, we are running out of time. I certainly believe that. Like, yeah. But hey, right now as we speak, the whole Ukraine thing is not happening by the book, not by the book that they thought. What I see personally is I see the Nazi regimes that they put in there in 2014. They're the ones that are fueling this. It's not Putin. Putin's doing naturally what the U.S. would have done under the same
Yeah.
conditions. Like, if Nazis were taking out Canada right now,
Hmm.
the United States would be like, screw those Nazis. We're going to carpet bomb the whole thing back to the Stone Age. And that would happen. That would be how it would be handled by the way that they've done things in the past, as an example, right? Well, that's basically what Putin's doing, in my interpretation of what I see, anyway. Because I mean, things could be completely not that. But I don't think so. It's definitely not what people are seeing on the TV right now. That's for sure.
Oh no.
That's
First,
for
first casualty of war is the truth.
yeah. And the first thing people should do is cancel your cable subscriptions. Like, 'cause don't worry, Matlock will live without you.
Yeah. If
But
it comes in the mail, it's probably not a real.
yeah,
You won a trip to Aruba or wherever.
it's
You better search for truth.
it's just so
It's not gonna
bizarre.
land off your doorstep.
Do you have any advice, Phil? Do you have any advice for anybody? Like, whether they want to get into politics or not, or
Pick
how
a
do they
fight.
move forward?
Pick something. Look. You can't. Here's what I tell people, and I've been in the battle since the early '90s. Okay, it's been a
Yeah.
long time.
That's around the
And a lot
time
of,
that I started to come around. Yeah.
but I've seen a lot of people who want to get involved in the war, and it's a spiritual war. There's a dark side.
Yeah.
Okay, and what I warn them is, you better get wisdom, spiritual wisdom, at the same time as you get this knowledge of the enemy, because otherwise you'll crash and burn. And I've seen a lot of people crash and burn. Uh, you've got to decide what it is that you're called to do. Uh, do something. Certainly be vocal and be bold, but also be wise as serpents. Okay,
Yeah.
as the Bible says. So, like I say, I personally didn't get it figured out, and I don't have everything nailed down. Never
Yeah.
will. The neat thing is, with Christianity, because I'm a Christian and I promote it, and that is, you're on the right path. You're never going to arrive until it's over, but at least you can get on the right path, and it doesn't matter even what you've done. I've done things in the past that are despicable, but on the other hand, uh, I I can be forgiven, and for me, if this is all there is, if this physical existence is all there is, I would probably be an alcoholic or a drug addict or whatever, because if I looked at it honestly and said this is it, then what's the use?
Right.
Why battle? So I didn't understand those working on the dark side until I understood the spiritual aspect. I didn't understand many of those, like Solzhenitsyn and other people, um, who were doing tremendous work under tremendous odds and pressure and persecution. I didn't understand them too, also, until I
Right.
understood the spiritual aspect. So there's the good and the bad. We're certainly in a time when evil is good and good is evil, and bitter's for sweet and sweet for bitter.
Up is down, down
No,
is up.
nothing. No history book, no greater history book, even by people who aren't Christians, they'll admit is the Bible. There's so many things in it that keep coming true,
Yeah.
and it shows us the battle that we're in, who we're against, and really what's going to happen. We just don't know the timetable.
It also shows and exemplifies that there's a prehistory that we're
Hmm.
unaware of, and
Oh yeah.
it's almost unattainable to know, and yet the spirit and the rhythm and the beats of that prehistory are still moving and still beating, and I feel that. I don't know how or why that is, but you're talking about doing despicable things. I was a hey was I was basically bottomed out low life like 20 years ago, and slowly trying to figure out my course since then, and turning into this like pastime, I guess you could call it. I don't like to use the word career because A, it's not very profitable. B, it's horrible. Like, I mean, the amount of
Oh,
stuff that you have to the information that you take in on a daily basis. Like, I don't think anybody could do it. Like like when I say anybody, I don't mean anybody. I mean I don't think every single person
everything
has a
can.
capability
Yeah.
of doing it. Yeah, like
Mhm. Yeah.
it's you got to be prepared to handle it, and you know it's bizarre. I feel like I've been placed in a unique position, so
Good.
I
Yeah.
I don't want to waste it. I don't want to waste
I
that
don't.
chance.
Well, luck is not part of my vocabulary anymore. I
Yeah,
do believe things happen for a purpose,
yeah.
and it's pretty easy, because to do good is always, it's always good to do good, and it's always bad to do
It's
evil.
it's
So
so much
it's pretty
easier.
simple.
It's so much easier to do the right thing because you gotta plan and conspire to do the bad thing. Like it's
Yeah. Yeah. It must be horrible to to well, continually cover up what you've done with even worse.
yeah, and remember, and you got to remember all the lies. Like it's easy to
Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
the truth. Like like, and that's how I kind
Yeah.
of it's kind of how I roll now. Because like, a my memory's starting to fail, so I'd be a horrible criminal or a bad guy. Like
Truth will set you free.
right.
Uh,
Absolutely, man. That's a
well,
that's a great note to end this on. By the way, I
yeah,
mean,
let's do this again sometime and get
absolutely.
some others.
Yeah, we'll
So,
we'll definitely do this again. I do the daily Noonarino, well, daily as much as I possibly can anyway. And I have a weekly show. It's the Truth Hurts podcast. It's a little bit more on the edge, and I try to get a panel of people that, with differing opinions and what have you. And that's usually on a Saturday or Saturday or Friday or something. But yeah, man, I really enjoyed this talk, and I hope everyone listening, I hope they enjoyed it. This has been a really trying time, man. I couldn't believe things would get weirder. Like in
yeah.
2014, like, when we were talking at the time, we had doctors were getting murdered or suicided. We had all
Hmm.
sorts of weird things going on then. Who knew that
Yeah.
would lead up to this, where we are,
Yeah.
today?
I think that was in preparation. They got rid of a lot of the doctors
Yeah, they did.
prior to this COVID thing. I think it was,
Yeah,
they were calling the intelligentsia.
yeah.
Um,
If they weren't on
so
board, get rid of the flotsam. And,
yeah, but if anyone wants to know any more about what we did here in West Virginia, my website hudoc.info has been there for 8 years. It's basically dedicated to the rule of law battle here in West Virginia that went national. And if you go to livestream.com, I have a channel called Philip Hudok, Hudok, and we live stream right here from my house 2 times a month. We have guests from all over the world. Okay, we've had Dr. Madej, Dr. Nikovitz. You know, we had your pastor up in Canada that's in jail right now. We had him
mm,
live stream, I think, twice. Let's see what else. My pastor has a radio program, and if you go to Call the Decision, that's the website that we have. It's a non-denominational Christian ministry. Okay, Christianity, the mainline churches are probably the biggest problem this country has.
mm,
Okay,
mm-hmm.
so I they're incorporated.
Yeah.
They're contracting with the government, so they're simply a protege of the government.
It's funny, and this is like, again, this could unpack an entire episode on its own. But when I was in Mexico,
Hmm.
I really I didn't understand what Rosicrucians were until I went and I saw the influence of Christianity in Mexico, because the way it's presented is like, it's like all of the things like in that what is that movie with Nicolas Cage, that American Treasures or whatever. Anyway, yeah, it was all Freemason stuff, man. I was like, holy crap! Like it was like in your face, and
I think you were in Mexico the last time
yeah,
for that
that I
conversion.
was. I just got there. I think I just
You were in a
arrived.
hotel or something.
Yep.
You and some other guy, or
Yeah, I was
you know.
there with Amanda Mary Jewell, and we were at the time, we were going to be meeting up with a doctor who was doing holistic work on one side and doing Western medicine at the same time. So we were kind of meeting a
Hmm.
hybrid doctor. We ended up actually starting up a clinic and treating people and doing a whole bunch of stuff. As a whole adventure in itself, and very humbling, to be frank. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about people. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about the industry, and I learned about the criminal nature of medicine. And it was an eye opener. Um, it was crazy, but yeah, and that was. I think I'd only been in Mexico 1 week, or maybe a few days or something, when I talked to you last. I remember doing that
Hmm.
podcast, and yeah, we were in a bed and breakfast place in it was in the eastern side of Mexico there.
Well,
Ah,
so, if people want to see something interesting, I have a Facebook called Mr. Obama Head. I
Obama
built a
head.
seven, yeah, I built a 7 foot tall, smoke blowing, speaking, head turning Mr. Obama head, and I took him on a trailer all over West Virginia, and up to D.C. when I was running for U.S. Senate.
Oh wow.
And it was all Obama's own quotes, like whatever we once were, we're no longer a Christian nation, and on and on. But
Wow. Huh.
yeah, I think it's still on Facebook. I think there's
I'm gonna look.
videos.
I'm gonna look that up later. I'm gonna check that out. Oh,
Mr. Obama.
Mr. Obama head. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. You know what? We could have a lot of conversations about a lot of
Yeah.
things, and Obama's another one to unpack. But man, it's so good to talk to you. I'm gonna call her a day for the Daily Noonerino today.
Okay.
And man, it's been a pleasure, and so good to catch
Take
up
care.
with you, man.
Yeah, it has been. You watch the northern sector. I'll watch the southern sector.
Yeah, I'll try, but those sneaky Trudeaus, let me tell you. I mean, Castro's. Castro, Trudeau, whatever. Who's counting, right?
Yeah.
Someone's got to count the doughs. But anyway, man. Yeah, so anyone, to our 2 listeners out there, this was Philip Hudak and myself, Robert J. Morris, and we're signing off for the day, but we'll see you tomorrow.